Welcome to everyone who has tuned in to our webinar today. A few housekeeping points. The webinar will be recorded and made available on the SIG page and on the APM YouTube page. Likewise, the presentation will be available on the APM community page and the APM SlideShare page. If we run out of time, then those questions not responded to will be answered on the community page. A survey will be sent out to those attending, and it would be appreciated if this is completed so that we can improve our future webinars. CPD certificates are not issued for the webinars. Therefore, delegates should self-assess on their CPD records. Now, coming back to the webinar, titled Introduction to Program Management and brought to you by the APM Program Management Group. The aim of our interest group is to provide an international forum for effective learning and development of program management. My name is Vivian Walters, your host for today. I'm a committee member of the APM Program Management Specific Interest Group and the Virtual Events Lead. Our presenter, Alan Macklin, is a committee member of the APM Program Management Interest Group as well. His total career spans almost 40 years, with more than half spent on major portfolios, programs, and projects. So expect to be given great case examples. Alan?
Vivian, thank you very much indeed, and a good morning to, or rather good afternoon to all of you out there. Any background noise you may get over the next half an hour that I intend to talk for is probably something to do with the gale that's blowing outside. That's my background. This is very much about an introduction to program management, and those who are black belts, I invite you to switch off now and go and do better things. Those who are interested in this as a beginner or a potential beginner or just interested, hang on in there. My test is whether I can keep you sufficiently entertained and interested that you're still online by the time I finish speaking. My permanent employer, CH2M, has a very strict ground rule where they have meetings of more than 4 people. And we always start with a safety moment, health and safety being extremely important in our profession. My particular safety moment refers to the use of earpieces, very topical given that most of you will be listening in. My guess is rather less than half will be using a loudspeaker, most using some sort of headgear. When I was working on the Thames Tideway Tunnel, this was a particular concern for us, and a survey of all our employees and those we were recruiting identified that in the age bracket 20 to 30, about 80% of all the people who came to work for us suffered some form of hearing loss. Clearly, this is a significant issue. Further investigation discovered that most of those who were suffering the most severe hearing loss attributed it, or it was able to be attributed, to the use of ear systems where the earbuds go inside the ear canal, i.e. either of the 2 sorts of speaker systems you can see on the screen on the left-hand side. If you're going to use speaker systems or head systems, always, wherever you can, use the ones on the right-hand side, i.e. the sort that sits outside the ear canal rather than inside the ear canal. Depending your age range, this is either a safety moment for you, or maybe it's your children, or perhaps in some cases your grandchildren. It is a creeping hearing loss that is the real problem for the future. Enough of safety. Why program management, and why now? One could argue that program management has been practiced since mankind stood on 2 feet. However, most people will recognize that it's relatively new as a profession, and program management absolutely recognizes this. What program management is all about is change. It's about deriving the benefits. Delivering the stuff is the project management. Delivering the benefits of it is program management. Programs will come on to in just a minute, but as an example of the scale at which this is operating, the new National Infrastructure Commission developed the National Infrastructure and Construction Plan late last year, and in it they identified 728 major programs and projects. In total, over £500 billion worth of sterling, of which over half of that is due to be expended in the next 5 years. And this will require a step change in the scale and in the quality of program management if we are going to make a success of this as a nation. And it was very much against that background that the Prog-M SIG reviewed the APM's introduction to program management, first written 10 years ago, and concluded that now was the time to update it. And the second edition has very recently been released. So what am I trying to cover in the half hour that I have with you? In terms of my presentation, 4 relatively simple steps. Very much a quick canter through what is a program, and you'll note I'm not going to try and tell you what is not a program. Some indications of how to run one, how to assess, reflect, consider, think about them, and then a few hints and tips on where you might like to go to learn some more. I will, to the best of my ability, illustrate these from my personal experience, and whilst most of my personal experience has been in the engineering and the infrastructure world, and I shall be drawing quite a few examples from the London Olympics game, I freely acknowledge here, and I wish I was able to get across the message that program management is much, much wider than just the infrastructure and engineering fields, and probably program management has a greater commonality across the sectors than does project management. Let me start. So what is a program? A number of different well-recognized descriptions of a program. A lot of people will refer to a complex project as a program. Given my background in defence acquisition, a good example of this might have been the introduction of the attack helicopter in the 1990s. Introducing the attack helicopter, the project to procure and introduce the Apache helicopter was complex in its own right. But just delivery of the helicopter was not enough. That would have been a piece of metal sitting on the ground somewhere, looking smart, looking threatening, but of no military use. The program was involved in delivering the benefit associated with that helicopter through a range of projects that looked at how this was going to be delivered, what the infrastructure support it was going to be, where the training came from, what the data flows needed to be, what the logistics support was, but based around a single project, albeit a very complex one. The second of the most common types of programs would be a sequence of projects. Example I would offer here, which some may think slightly different, there was a program and defence had decided, or rather government had decided, that the UK should retain warship as a sovereign national capability to design and build warships. That needed to be dealt with as a program so that as you go through the series of destroyers, frigates, aircraft carriers and other types of warship, you have a consistent demand of resources, of information, so that you sustain that sovereign national industrial capability. And just a couple of examples here, it was that program that led to the conclusion that we should not buy our support tankers from UK yards, because that would create a boom and bust in the industry, which was not sustainable and would not give us the best assets either for the armed forces or for the nation. The third very common program is one related to a series of concurrent projects. My favorite example there would be the Olympic Park in 2012, where we were building 19 separate stadia within the park. That was being delivered in a congested area, same number of new stadia as they'd had in Beijing 4 years previously, on a quarter of the size. And I'll come back to the Olympics again later on. The final definition of program is how often have you heard people ask for the program when what they actually mean is the schedule. and that is the only one that I won't talk to any further. English is a great language for misunderstanding, and when anybody asks you about your program, worth establishing what they think they mean by a program as opposed to what you think you mean by a program. With the exception of the last, all three can be covered or are covered by the definitions, and there are two different definitions offered here. The APM's definition in the body of knowledge around a group of related projects. And if you go to Managing Successful Programs, one of the standard textbooks for program management, again, a temporary flexible organization. The key character of both of those relates to driving benefit and relates to change in an organization. And the key thing about change and benefits is, what is the business need? Where is the business case for this program? And that invites a significant depth of second-order questions. Is there actually a need for change here? And a key challenge within organizations, it may be desirable, it may be needed, but does the organization have the ability, the capability, and the culture to embrace that change in order to deliver the benefits? You could have the best set of projects to deliver a change, but if the organization cannot cope with that change, then the benefits won't be realized. Just as a little example, one of my favorites here, if you think about the advances of technology in the motor car industry, you can now get windscreen glass that automatically sheds water, so you don't need windscreen wiper blades. However, the organization, as in UK, has not matured with that technology, and if you don't have windscreen wiper blades, you will not pass your MOT. So you can have a perfectly safe car to drive in terms of visibility with glass that sheds the water, but you're not allowed to drive it without the windscreen wipers, which adversely affect your vision. A cultural issue. The second half of this slide, we are talking here about addressing complexity and uncertainty. There is a huge challenge that runs between the change agenda, where the projects and the programs sit, and the business as usual activities. I will return to this more later, but one of the biggest challenges for the program manager and the program staff is creating the conditions for project success by building that relationship with the business as usual activity, who in most cases are the ones who've got to realize the benefits, and the project-led activity dealing with change. So to set in context, and I will introduce here for those who are not familiar, the concept of the three Ps, portfolio, program, and project level, and the way they link together to organizational strategy. This P3 relationship, portfolio, program, and project relationship, is key to understanding how the three fit together. Strategy, that organizational strategy, sets the direction in which everything is trying to go, the business, the organization. As a quick summary, a one-liner, I would describe portfolio management about managing the resources and allocating the resources so that the total capacity of the organization to embrace and deliver change ensures that the right projects and the right programs are selected, and that the organization is capable of delivering those projects. And when I talk about resources, I don't just mean money, and I don't just mean hot bodies on seats. I mean the totality of organization, including the cultural capacity. Now, the interesting thing about this particular diagram is that it highlights the fact that not everything has to be sitting within a Russian doll. You can have projects that do not sit within a program. You can, arguably, and depending on how your portfolio is constructed, have projects that don't sit within a portfolio or programs that don't sit within a portfolio. That is a question really for the organizational strategy, for how the organization is structuring its portfolios, programs, and projects. And one of the very common debates to be had at organizational level is whether the portfolio includes business as usual activities or does not include business as usual activities. There is no right or wrong answer here, but the organisation needs to decide which way it's going to go and then stick with that description. So how do we run our program? Stand by for a whistle-top tour at which I will try to address some of the key principles of program management and how we do it. Let me start with the program life cycle. At face value, this is very similar to the project life cycle. And the key point to note is that, or a couple of key points to note. Firstly, look at that black diamond down in the bottom right. Programs do not go on forever. They tend to be rather longer than a project, but where you see a program that goes on forever, you should be questioning whether this really is proper program management. Program management is about delivery of the change, and it should then come to closure and transition, making sure that everything is transferred to business as usual. The second point about this slide is that inextricable link to the business as usual line at the bottom end. And you'll note the distinction between the program life cycle and the extended program life cycle is all about the benefits realization phase. And one of the key things about this, and I'll talk a little bit more when I talk about some of the characters, is that during the extended program life cycle, it is up to the business as usual people to deliver on the benefits that the program has enabled them to realize. In many cases, the program during the program life cycle only introduces some of the benefits. The full benefits realization needs to be delivered inside the business as usual. The second piece then I want to move on to here is the concept of tranches. In most cases, most programs are designed so that they aim to deliver quick wins early. Most of you will have heard of that phrase. Programs that run for many, many, many years and deliver nothing run a huge risk of losing their audience because there is no confidence of the benefits yet to come. Most good programs are therefore organized into tranches, where the difference between the tranches is a matter of timing, and it's associated with releasing into the business some benefits early. And if you look at the ramp on the top of the slide, the benefits realization, just dropping one tranche of pieces into the business as usual organization, i.e. the steps on the next level down, that itself doesn't deliver the benefit, it delivers the enablers of benefit. The benefits are only realized over time as the change that is being delivered then gets rolled out, realized and exercised in the business as usual activities. I would offer again an example from my military background here. When we were introducing new fleets of equipment, one of the challenges was always, do you wait until you got everything right and then deliver all the equipment at once, or do you do it a bit at a time? For those who, particularly those in the Cornwall area, from Culdrose, the Merlin helicopter fleet from Culdrose, we made a policy decision within MOD. We were going to buy about 40 odd of these helicopters. And the question was, do we release them to the Royal Navy to use them, to gain some benefit from them, to learn on them, one at a time, in batches of 10, or do we wait until the end of 10 years and introduce them all at once? The conclusion we reached, which was very unusual in those days, is we would release them one at a time. Now this has downsides as well as upsides, and the support organisation complained bitterly that they had about 40 different types of Merlin helicopter because each one was a little bit better at a slightly different equipment configuration requiring different spares. And whenever I heard the complaints about this, my feedback to them was, yes, but you've had this military capability 10 years earlier than you would have done if we waited to the end and gave you a fleet of 40 all the same. And what's more, because you've practiced and trained with them, You've been able to improve your operating procedures and been able to feed back to us some improvements that you're getting into the later marks that you wouldn't have had earlier. But it is, I recognise, a balanced argument. Let me talk just a little bit about some of the responsibilities, the roles and the actors. And the key thing here relates to the interaction between the project and program world of the business with the business as usual. And it's in this space that governance and leadership from the top down is key. I have never been anywhere where I have not seen the tensions between the business as usual activities who are trying to do the day job and by and large work on an annual planning round where the norm is things don't change much, and the project life cycle where the year is an arbitrary package of time, and you do not repeat things year after year after year. The project evolves over its time. Project organizations change dramatically. They go up and down, whereas business as usual likes steady state. Getting that leadership, the integrated leadership between the business as usual people and the delivery people is key. Having a clear sponsoring group from the business providing direction to the projects and programs gives the business as usual people confidence that these project guys are not out of control. The second one down highlights that critical link between the project and the program team and the business as usual through the business change manager. In my experience, the best business change managers come from the business as usual team. That's where his best linkages are, his interpersonal relationships are, because he becomes the voice of the project and programs is into business as usual, the trusted voice that makes the case for embracing the change that is being offered. And within all this, managing that integration day to day, managing relations and setting the conditions for success is the ringmaster, the program manager. The fourth one down is something I haven't introduced yet, the program or project management office. And the key here is precisely in those words. Nobody notices a smooth running machine. Having a PMO working along in the background as the data cruncher, the data recorder, the analysts of what is going on is absolutely a key to success. A small example, if I may, from the Olympics example. Of the 19 different venues, clearly the thing for the Olympic Park was not when the first venue finished, but when the last venue finished. The PMO on the Olympic Park identified that one of the later venues appeared from the data being collected to be running behind. And the PMO identified this 12 months before the venue is due to be completed. For about 6 months, the prime contractor on that venue denied that there was a problem. Everything could be caught up, there weren't really delays, there was nothing wrong with the critical path. It took 6 months before the contractor finally acknowledged that yes, they had a problem. Because the PMO had been able to do the analysis of the data, they had also allowed the program manager then to plan some contingencies that meant that resources were able to be directed towards the errant venue, and we were able to get it to be delivered on site. One of the very interesting things in terms of the governance and leadership piece is where that PMO sits. In the Thames Tideway Tunnel, we made a command decision, or an executive decision, that the PMO, which many people would argue should sit under the program manager, should actually sit under the chief operating officer of the business. The intent here was to ensure the integrity of the data for the board and to ensure that the program manager couldn't get at the PMO and doctor the results that he thought ought to be presented to the board, rather than the results the chief operating officer felt the board needed to know. Once again, There is no right answer, but getting the governance right is absolutely critically important. And I leave the best to last on this slide. It's engaging with stakeholders. The one key aspect of program management is that engaging with stakeholders. I've used the term creating the conditions for project success before as a key role for the program manager, and creating those conditions is largely about managing their stakeholders, knowing who they are, knowing what their personal or organizational objectives are, and keeping them properly informed. Now, I rather like this little picture of the organizational context. It recognizes the three levels of portfolio, program, and project. It also recognizes the balance between the client side and the delivery side of each. And if you work bottom up, yes, for each project there needs to be a project sponsor, which is a client function, and the project manager. At the program level, and I use the term SRO, Senior Responsible Owner, as the client and the program manager. And within an overall portfolio, you've got a portfolio manager. You will find many people wanting to debate who the client side of the portfolio is. If the portfolio is the totality of your business of change, then my argument would be surely the CEO is accountable for the totality of the business of change, and he therefore should be the client lead on the portfolio. The important point I wish to make on this slide is the direction of the black arrows, because they are the things that indicate where the relationship lies. If you find diagonal arrows going on, so the SRO long screw driving the project manager and telling him what to do, that is where your problems start to come. And I would always argue that where you have roles and responsibilities, in project world, if one individual is accountable to one person for everything he does, he's probably not really working in project world. Let me take the project manager. The project manager is accountable to the project sponsor for the output of his project, but he's accountable to the program manager for how he does it and how that integrates with the rest of the program. Let me go back to the Olympic Park example again. One of the strategic objectives we had on the Olympic Park was a 96% reuse of materials found on site, a huge demand for sustainability. One of the strategic decisions made by the program was that there would be no ready-mix concrete trucks on site at all. And just think how much concrete was poured at the Olympic Park. At program level, we set up 2 concrete batching plants, and the project managers were constrained. They could only order their concrete for their projects from those batching plants. The project manager was not accountable to the project sponsor for how he delivered the venue. He was accountable for what he delivered. Just a small vignette. And for those who are very familiar and comfortable with job descriptions, in project world, in program world, I'd always encourage you, don't talk about roles and responsibilities. Talk about roles, responsibilities, authority, i.e. what delegation is that role being given, and accountability. To whom is this role accountable and for what? If you can get that correct, you're halfway to solving your governance challenges. Enough of the whistle-stop tour. How do we assess a program? How do we know whether it's set up for success? What are those aspects that I might have forgotten or are missing from my good program? At the turn of the millennium, the government concluded that it really wasn't doing a very good job of delivering major government projects, and they invited Sir Peter Gershon to set up an organisation in government called the Office of Government Commerce, the OGC. What Sir Peter and his team did was pull together an approach to portfolio, program and project management to help people with exactly this. He developed 7 perspectives, they were called, and you can see them on that circle, which were common to program management, project management, and portfolio management. And the beauty of the P3M3 model, Portfolio, Program and Project Management Maturity Model, is that whilst you have the same 7 perspectives, the model brings out for the wise user the differences between within each perspective between what the portfolio should be doing, the program should be doing, and what the project should be doing. This seeks to ensure that what your program manager is not doing is trying to long screwdriver the project manager. The program is a very different entity looking for different things, and the program managers who try to be supra project managers are generally the worst of the worst program managers than those who understand the piece. Again, if I can draw on a military analogy, most people are well aware of the Normandy landings in 1944. There were 3 great generals involved there, Patton, Bradley and Montgomery. As generals, they were brilliant, and their boss was a guy called Eisenhower. Eisenhower was not a military genius, but he was an outstanding strategic leader, because what he did was created the conditions that kept those 3 subordinates from scratching their eyes out and pursuing the strategic aim. He could not have done what any of the 3 of them did on the day and in the landings immediately after Normandy, but he was the man who was required to compete them, to prevent them becoming their internal worst enemies. What I'd like to do in the next 5 minutes is to take a very, very quick cant around the dial of this. The organizational governance piece is very much about setting up the overall construct, and it's the way I tend to describe it as a shorthand is what is being done to the program, how is it being governed from the outside looking into the program. Whereas the management control is how the program is managing itself. So it's within the management control segment that you will see the PMO operating. The stakeholder management I've talked of many times, that is the key. And if I was to highlight 2 areas of the 7 perspectives that are particularly important at the program management level, it would be the stakeholder management and the benefits management. Risk management needs little introduction to those on this call, I would hope. It is critical in everything. And in the financial management section, the focus here is not about how you do your audit and accounting. The financial management at program level is all about getting that balance between the annual accounting cycle of the business as usual and the management of project resources, particularly the financial resources, where they're managed, how the risk provision is held, how it is released. One of the great successes of the Olympics was that the Olympic Village was due to have been done by private funding. Following the economic crash in 2008, where was that £1 billion going to come from? Because of the way the program had managed its contingency reserve and was progressively releasing that reserve back into Treasury, when the crash happened, the program was able to identify that without asking for any more money, they could incorporate the costs of the village within the original approval. The resource management, widely recognized as having 4 separate elements of resource management, and that obviously is excluding the finances. The first and most widely recognized would be the HR function. Who are the staff in the program teams, the project teams? The second critical resource here is information. And how does that information flow? How is it managed? The third element of resource management is the infrastructure piece, and that's both the IT infrastructure to support the information management, but also the physical infrastructure for how you're going to run the program. Many programs have a transient demand for infrastructure. If I think again of the Thames Tideway Tunnel, there are four primary driving sites along the banks of the Thames, and managing that infrastructure, getting the permits, getting the releases, managing the traffic flows around there is a critical component for something that has to deliver the tunnel and then effectively disappear as soon as possible after the end. The fourth component of resource management, which is a bit that tends to make commercial and procurement people unhappy, is those elements of resources that are being contracted in. What is your supply chain? And I say it tends to make commercial and procurement people unhappy because they would say, well, hang on a second, you're reducing commercial and procurement to a second or even a third tier of P3M. The answer is yes, but that tier is a purely conceptual view of the world. It doesn't reflect the importance. Which brings me round to the top of the tree, the benefits management. The difference, I would say, between benefits management at project level and program level. At project level, it's what is it that you are delivering. You're the project manager, you deliver it, you tie it in a bow, you give it to your project sponsor along with your post-project report, walk away, and that is done. At program level, benefits management is that enduring piece of the benefits realization. Are you continuing to be on track with what was promised in the business case?
End the webinar there. Thank you. Goodbye.